Write a VBA macro that creates a table of contents sheet in Excel. Okay, so don't you think it's interesting that these new AI tools can output text faster than a human can type, but just about as quickly as we can read or scan the text? I don't know about you, but I just find that fascinating about these tools. Now, before we get to all that, if you haven't heard, this is the new ChatGPT tool by OpenAI, and it's a tool that can help us with our Excel skills. It can help us answer questions, and as you can see here, it can even help us write code, which is really pretty cool. So in this video, I'm gonna go over some uses for this tool and some potential drawbacks and things to understand, and I'll also kind of talk about my opinion of this, if this is gonna take over the world and replace our jobs as data analysts, or if this is a tool that can really help and assist us in our day-to-day tasks. Okay, so let's take a look at some ways that ChatGPT can help us with our day-to-day Excel tasks. The first is what I call research. So let's say you're working in a file, and maybe it's a file that you didn't create, but someone else created, and you come across a formula that you don't quite understand. In this example here, I have this XLOOKUP formula, which is a relatively simple formula, but maybe you haven't used XLOOKUP yet. So we can use ChatGPT to help us with this. So I'm just gonna copy the formula text. You can do this up here in the formula bar in the cell, just hit Control-C to copy that. Then I'm gonna jump over to ChatGPT, and I'm just gonna ask it to explain this formula. So I'm gonna say, explain this Excel formula. You don't necessarily have to provide that much context. You might just be able to paste the formula in, but I'm gonna ask it to explain the formula. And as you can see here, it's going to write out a few paragraphs to explain this formula. And one important thing to note here is that every time you ask it a question, it gives you a different answer. So I've asked it this question before, it gave me a different answer. And the previous time I did this, it gave me a longer answer. But if you're not satisfied with that answer, you can also click this regenerate response button, and then it'll write out a different answer to the same question. So here's its second response. As you can see, this one's a bit longer. It talks more about the arguments and breaks down each of those along with the columns and the table as well. So this might be a better response for you if you're not familiar with XLOOKUP, as it's a bit more detailed. And if you're wondering about more advanced or complex formulas, here's a formula here that has a bunch of nested functions. I fed this one to ChatGPT, and as you can see here, it does a pretty good job of explaining all of the different functions within the formula here. It also got the indirect function here, which I thought was pretty good, and explains overall what the formula does. Now, it's also very important to note that the answers aren't always 100% correct. This is the XLOOKUP formula that I asked about it earlier and a different response I gave. And in that response, it has this paragraph here that says it's important to note that the lookup column should be the first column of the table, and the table should be assorted in ascending order. That is not true for XLOOKUP. That's instructions for an old VLOOKUP formula, and the whole point about sorting in ascending order was a big point of confusion for VLOOKUP, and it's not true when you're doing an exact match. And you also don't have to have the lookup column in the first column. That's why XLOOKUP was created, so we can get around that and not have to use index match. So it's just important to note that this isn't always 100% accurate. I'm going to talk more about that later in the video. And I should also mention that OpenAI, the creator of ChatGPT, warns that it can produce incorrect results. It mentions that in the app, and they also have this blog post here with a list of limitations. So definitely check this out if you're going to be using ChatGPT. So along with doing research, ChatGPT can also help us solve problems in Excel. In this example, I asked it how to combine multiple worksheets in Excel, which is a very common problem or task that we do, and it came up with 3 different solutions. Now, not all these solutions are correct by any means, but I do like that it gives us options here. I've always said with Excel that there's always a million different ways to solve a problem in Excel because we have so many different tools at our disposal. And that's very true, and at least ChatGPT gives us some of those options. It says we can move or copy, use a consolidate feature, or use Power Query or Power Pivot. Now, the exact instructions here for each of these aren't really correct, and it would require more research on your part to figure these out, but it does give you some guidance. I also asked it how to find entire blank rows, and again, it says to use the go-to menu here and go to special to highlight blanks. With entire blank rows, again, this isn't really going to fully work here. However, it does have this additional paragraph down here with using a formula, which would work to highlight entire blank rows, and then you can filter and delete them. Okay, so now I just want to rapid fire through a few other ways that you can use ChatGPT with Excel. So here I asked it to explain a macro. Let's say you come across a workbook that contains a macro in it. You're not sure what it does. Here I just copied one of my own macros from our website. And as you can see down here, it explained what that macro does. And it did a pretty good job of explaining it. So that's one potential use for this tool. Another one is here I asked it to explain VLOOKUP to me like an angry drunken sailor would. So if you want to have fun with this tool, you absolutely can. And it did a really good job of what I consider maybe an angry drunken sailor to sound like and talk like to explain VLOOKUP in those ways. You can also have it create data for you. So here I wanted to just create a fake data set for a coffee shop and the sales data. So it did a pretty good job of creating a table with some columns there with data. I also tried to ask it to analyze data, and I just pasted in a range of data from a pivot table here. And as you can see, it also does a pretty good job of explaining that, finds the average of these amounts and the high and lows for some particular months. And as we saw at the beginning of the video, it can also write macros and write VBA code. And here are a few examples of the exact same macro for the table of contents. And every single time, like I said before, it outputs a different macro. And these vary quite drastically in terms of what the macro does. Most of them will work. However, this one here, for some reason, it got some of the code here in this box to copy the code, and some of the code is outside of that. So again, if you weren't familiar with macros and didn't realize that, you might just copy this code into your workbook, and that wouldn't work because it doesn't contain the code for the full macro. So I want to wrap it up by talking about my thoughts on ChatGPT and artificial intelligence tools in general. These tools are definitely here to stay, and they will be a part of our future. They will also get better over time. So as we saw today, it produced some incorrect results and some things that could lead to errors, but over time, these are definitely going to improve. And I do encourage you to learn how to use these tools. I view them as an assistant that can help us really improve our productivity. So if there's time-consuming tasks that you don't like to do and want to automate, or this tool can help you with those tasks. It can help improve your productivity. For example, like we saw, if you know VBA and you write macros, but you don't want to spend a bunch of time writing a specific macro, you could use some of these AI tools to help with that. However, I wouldn't blindly use these tools. If you don't know VBA and you just have it start writing macros, it might not write the correct macro. Same goes with Excel formulas. If you just blindly use it and have it write formulas for you, you might not have confidence that those formulas and the functions that it uses are going to produce the correct results in your model. And obviously, I want to prevent you from having any types of embarrassing mistakes that could be caused if you just use this tool on its own. So I do encourage you to learn these tools and use them and get familiar with them, but also learn Excel and all of its features and functions. You'll need to be familiar with those in order to be able to maximize your productivity with these tools. Otherwise, like I said, it might just get you in trouble. So I don't necessarily think these tools are going to replace data analysts, not anytime soon anyways. There's still a need for you, but I think it will help increase productivity for analysts that are using these tools in conjunction with elevating their skills and learning more about Excel and increasing their knowledge there. So I hope that helps you. Of course, leave a comment below with your questions and thoughts on this as well. I'd love to learn what you're thinking, how you're using these tools, or if you feel like you're going to use them in the future. Thanks again for watching. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.